Hello and welcome to the Pratfalls podcast, a show that features conversations with folks who make cool stuff and how they make their life work. I'm your host, Levi Weinhagen. You can find me on Twitter at thatlevi or go to thatlevi.com for all my various projects. For past episodes of this show, go to pratfallspod.com or just go to your podcasting app and look up the Pratfalls podcast. We've got a lot of episodes. This is my conversation with Maggie Ryan Sandford. Maggie is a delight. I've known her for a number of years. We've been able to work on several different kinds of projects. She's an excellent writer, an excellent performer, an excellent educator, and an excellent person. So I think you'll enjoy this free-flowing conversation about life and work and existence and words and everything else. So without further ado, here is Maggie Sandford. All right, well, I'm going to start asking you questions about you, and then you can answer them or tell me to get bent. Old-fashioned.
Yeah, get bent. Governor, those are mixing.
So you're Maggie Ryan Sandford.
I am.
Yes. Thanks for...
So far, so good.
Thanks for talking to me today, Maggie.
You're welcome, Levi. Thanks for having me.
It's going to be weird because I know you... I feel like I know you pretty well.
Yeah, I think so.
In different ways. Like, we've connected through different spaces.
Mostly talking. What are we going to talk about, really?
I don't know. I'm going to ask... Well, I guess I have asked you specifics about yourself, but this is maybe a little more focused. Or maybe we'll pick one area. I don't know.
We better.
But first, I'm going to try and list, like, what I see as your body of work. Or your creative self, and then I want you to tell me. Yeah, I'm going to talk about your body of work,
Boom.
And then you can tell me what I missed or what you don't think fits in there.
Okay,
it's
cool.
A fun game.
This is fun.
With my guests.
I really wasn't thinking this would be so much about me. You're right.
Well, we'll get to that together.
Okay.
And if we want, we can just talk about me, and I'll pretend it's about you, and I'll be like a standard man.
That sounds good. That makes me more comfortable. It's the space that I'm more comfortable in.
So I think of you as a writer, top line, but I would say you write for live as well as writing for sort of academic-y spaces, as well as for television, radio spaces. Like, you have experience in all those things. You're a performer, you're a science communicator, you're I don't know if researcher is the right word, but you
for a hot minute.
You work in a bunch of science-y kind of ways. You've done work in TV production. You've done some radio-y kind of work. You've done a lot of storytelling, spoken word, poetry stuff. And I'm trying to feel like there's a couple other things. Like, I feel like you host stuff. That's a thing. So you can kind of like keep things moving. And then you seem like you've always been comfortable with a level of activism embedded in your creative work. So I don't know if you say activist, but I feel like you don't have any problems with your work bumping into activism and activism being a part of the work you do. So that's
nice.
My purview. What do you make of that?
That's good. The first thing I think is that I still need to figure out like a one-word version of that, which someday it's coming. I can tell, but that's not a new. I don't know what it is either. The second thing I thought of is you mentioned the researcher thing, and I was technically a researcher in the sense that it was my job title, research associate, for a year. But I feel like that's not enough to still be considered a researcher.
Right.
Although then at the same time, as a journalist, and...
Oh, I didn't say journalist.
That's okay.
Writer, it's in there.
Yeah, it is. And they really should be the same. But there are all these buzzwords that some sound cooler than others, and that's...
true.
We can get to this.
Let's get to it.
Well, actually,
you love
it segues
buzzwords.
Right into what I was going to say next about the activism, is that being a science person, being in the scientific community, sciencing, as I like to say,
yes.
Being an activist or having activism tendencies was hard for a minute, because I've been an activist since I was like little. Like at 3 years old, I was in a play about saving the whales with my mother for Greenpeace, and I played the little wizard who like begs the big Viking to stop killing the whales.
Did the Viking listen?
No.
Oof.
In fact, he shook his head, and then I slunk away sadly. But then weirdly shrugged and like went about my business, like what, smile, and then just like skipped away. It's like in retrospect, that doesn't seem like the message that.
But it seems accurate.
Yeah.
I asked.
I know, exactly. I don't remember anything else about the play. Just my job. And that I was supposed to dance around with an inflatable whale before the show because it was going to be beautiful, like 2 whale sounds dancing to
like
whale
a pre-show
sounds. Yeah.
appetizer.
Yep. Exactly.
Was your mother a Greenpeace person? Was she involved in?
Yeah, she was.
Or is? I don't need to
well,
say was.
Yeah,
I
I
don't
feel
want
like
to. Her life ended.
Oh, I hope not.
No,
I haven't
I don't.
spoken to her today.
Okay.
So
well,
thank you for making
this is
me.
terrifying.
Yeah. I'm just on. Everybody's on the edge right now, Levi.
It's true.
Yeah, my mom was an activist since she was a teenager. She was in the anti-war movement and the feminist movement, and she actually, I think this is accurate, was one of the first people in the state of Iowa to fight busing. No.
She's busing. She's down with
no,
busing.
No, I can't remember where they wanted to bus people. She wanted to desegregate the schools.
School segregation, yeah.
And so I don't know where people were. I would assume they would have to bus people in. So she was for that.
Yeah.
I'm too far removed from how busing works. But anyway, she just as in her capacity as like a student body representative was instrumental in desegregating her school. And then around the time that I was born, she was in anti-nuclear disarmament activism. I did a project about the Ballistic Missile Defense Organization when I was in 7th grade because of her.
Nice.
So we're still against it. Still wish there were fewer nuclear weapons out there. Seems like it's coming up again, among other things. And then, when I was like 10, I changed schools and got to have a new identity. So my new identity was like hippie, like old school, like bell bottoms, long hair, peace symbol, tie-dye t-shirt. That was like my signature shirt. And I think I was generally for, like, this was the Clinton years. Like, I don't know what I was protesting. I guess the Gulf War.
Yeah.
But we didn't know anything about it.
And protesting people not being chill.
Not just chill out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I didn't know that drugs were part of it at that time. My parents lied to me about that. And environmentalism. I was very about environmentalism at the time and still am.
Yeah.
So,
well, does that inform your passion for science? Like, you're someone I know who have worked, continue to work in science spaces in various contexts, but you also are just into science, which is generally true. I don't think a lot of people do science communication work who are like, that's just my job, I don't care that much about it.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But do you feel like the environmental focus brought you into the world of a passion for science?
Yeah, definitely. I think originally, and then what's exciting, I'll kind of go backwards through time. What's exciting about right now is that it's the scientific community, and this is painting with a broad brush, but there is a lot more vocal activism in the scientific community now, even especially since after the election, kind of increasingly. And I think my view is skewed because those are the people that I surround myself with, mostly online. Like, that's where most of my science community is online. And there used to, like I said, there was a moment in time where I struggled with that and tried not to be so public about activism because of all the stupid reasons that it seems, don't mistake my kindness for weakness kind of thing. Like, if you have feelings, then you must not be scientifically minded enough,
Yeah, scientists were supposed to be fundamentally objective.
Yeah.
And also, a lot of funding is tied to big government things where there are restrictions on ways your voice could be heard. I feel like that influenced scientists' moves toward activism. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, absolutely. Everything's kind of about funding. And major corporations, too. Major corporations do a lot of funding of scientific studies. And, the Western science, like most things Western and most things global, is largely white and male. So that, even, I was surprised the other day, like 2 days ago, Steven Pinker, author, and I think he was a neurobiologist.
But he's like now a really high regarded writer of easy to understand science books of difficult context.
Yes,
subjects.
Exactly. And I like him. And I felt there have been a few writers that this has happened where I like them, I admire their work, hope to do the kind of work that they do someday, and then they come out to be like bigots. So basically he said he had some problem with the march.
The Women's March?
No, not the Women's March, the Science March that's
right.
is being planned right now, which is going to happen on Earth Day, as of today was decided.
So that's April 20th?
22nd? Oh my God.
It's in April.
My 10-year-old self is screaming somewhere in the past. She's like, what's
I think it's
wrong,
22nd.
future
I think
self?
that's
Yeah,
right.
Thanks. Okay. Somewhere around there. It's not 420. So
no, that's
not
a different kind of green holiday.
Yes, exactly, which I also try to celebrate whenever possible. Even not on the day, just kidding.
You are still totally chill.
I'm so chill. But that's not true. I feel like I've gotten anxious over time. Wait a second. I thought you were complimenting me. But you can be, this is another thing I've come to. You can be cool and not chill. I really wanted to be chill for so long.
Yeah.
But I never have been and never will be. Like I'm not like, I hope I'm not obnoxious.
No.
I try not to impose my worries on other people.
Right.
Even though I do. But,
but you wouldn't say you're just like laid back.
Laid back. I mean, I would say I have laid back attitudes about things, but generally I'm more energetic and manic, hyperactive than a chill person might be.
Yeah.
It's like different dictionary definitions of chill. I'm one of them. I'm like liberal and chill in that regard. But no, I guess that's not true. I have too many opinions to be chill.
I feel like what you're doing right now is demonstrating a lack of chill.
Yeah, I know.
While you try to define chill. Which is amorphous. Like, what are we talking about?
Right. It's like trying to define cool, which I'm pretty sure we've tried to do several times.
Probably.
If you're trying to define it, you're not.
Yeah, that's all you need to know. You're failing at being cool.
Yeah. Did I answer your question?
No. No, well, I am curious.
You've asked me one question.
Let me what's her name?
Oh, the March on Science.
Yeah.
Or not on Science.
Well, you were talking about
March for Science.
being disappointed.
Yeah, and
Steven Pinker.
Because he said that, I don't remember his exact wording, but basically having activist opinions, like you were saying, is non-scientific. And my first reaction was like, dude, you need to go immerse yourself in the community of scientific people. I mean, the scientific community, yes, but I mean, specifically, he writes about the way that society works and like ethics and, these exact things. And I mean, whatever his opinions are personally, that's fine, but just to try and make this statement that science is caring about things is unscientific is like so old school, so old fashioned. Like I don't see how you could publicly make that statement and still feel like you're doing your job right.
Well, it's great to have ideas and hypotheses in the abstract, but then when you bring people into them, they are no longer abstract. Like
exactly,
humans are not abstract. It's grounded in reality suddenly. And
right.
I think that is a challenge that I do see, especially from a bunch of male scientists. About you're mucking up my beautiful ideas with nuance. Like, that's what ideas have.
Well, yeah. Well, but everybody has nuance. That's the thing is we talk about emotions as like, oh, that person's very emotional, meaning that person's very emotive is what it really means. Or they're they make me deal with their emotions, which I don't want to do. But everybody has emotions. Having them and not expressing them is still having them. And everybody knows by now that they come out in different ways, even if you think that you're not expressing them. And they definitely come out in your biases. I mean, that one of the sad things I think about the human race is that we are social animals, but we're super bad at being social. And so we're constantly fighting. I mean, that's one of the big crimes of this narrative, that there's objective, that we can exist in an objective world and like function objectively, is that we're just doing a worse job. We're just crippling ourselves in terms of what we're capable of. It's a waste of time to pretend that we can be objective. Just like it's almost like, before we realized that atoms were a thing, we were, kind of just ignorant of facts by modern scientific standards. And it feels the same way to suggest that scientists are objective. Feels like we're missing this very fundamental fact that is important to the way that science works.
And there comes a time where you're being willfully obtuse about it. Like you're not just ignorant, you're kind of choosing ignorance at a point.
Yeah.
I feel like you may be someone who can speak to this. Pardon me. There's a similar challenge in journalism. Mm-hmm. I don't know why I had to go up, but in journalism, I've never said that word, apparently.
That's how you pronounce it.
Totally afraid of how I'm going to say it. This can't be
Is it because it sounds kind of like pretentious?
Yeah, I think. Yeah. So I had to my brain was like, don't say it seriously, because then...
Yeah. But that shows that you're a nice person, because that's a word that I have to use when I want to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
Which is so dumb.
And I think people take themselves too seriously instead of just taking the things they're talking about seriously. Like there's two different things. I'm so smart.
Exactly. That's
journalism?
exactly what we're talking about.
But I feel like journalists right now, and maybe even institutional journalism organizations, are in a real tension point around objective-subjective. In that same space, denying that they are all subjective and every single thing you do as a journalist happens in a context, and you cannot fully remove the context because they want that perception from the reader, because there's so much accusation of a point of view, like biased media is such a thing. And I think that's the thing scientists are freaked out about too. They don't want to be accused of biases, so they have to yell at somebody who they see being open about the fact that they have biases.
Right.
The same thing's happening with journalists who are being actually fired for going, of course I have biases, I'm doing my best to work within that.
Right.
Even though those are then being the most overt, honest version of journalists you can find. What is your experience of those? Do you see the overlap there, and why is it that you find yourself working in spaces that are so full of tension and just existing?
I think I find myself working here because it seems like that's where the need is. Definitely. Also because I think that I feel that tension personally, that I grew up in a very creative family and consider myself a very creative person, but until recently, creativity was this fruity is the word that comes to mind, but I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I just flowery, soft, colorful, left brain, right brain, except for that's not actually real either.
I think even indulgent, it was viewed as indulgent.
Yeah, right, because exactly. And the antithesis to analytical and intellectual, and
creativity is subjective, and objective is like science and journalism and hard fact.
Right, exactly. And indulgent, like you say, in the sense that you're doing it for yourself.
Yeah, even though that's true of people who love science too.
Yeah, exactly. That's, oh my gosh, I'm reading The Gene right now, which is super good.
About Gene Hackman?
Yep. The Gene. R.I.P.
Who else could I have said? I feel like there's so many good genes.
Oh, no, not R.I.P. I was thinking Gene Wilder, R.I.P. him.
That would have been the better choice.
I'm pretty sure I told
maybe the most underappreciated actor of our time, Gene Wilder.
What does that mean?
That sincerely.
Exactly.
He's a brilliant performer.
Who doesn't appreciate him?
People appreciate him, but as a goofy weirdo. And I think the nuances he brought to what could have been really underwhelming.
The conversation.
The Willy Wonka, that movie.
Are we talking about Gene Wilder?
No, Gene Wilder, not Gene Hackman.
Okay.
Gene Hackman's fine.
Oh, yes, yeah.
No,
he's
I think Gene
the king
Wilder,
of nuance.
It just doesn't get put in the conversation of performers. But that is, I don't know why I decided to
I could talk about Gene Wilder for a long time.
Ground.
No, I think you're right.
Let's do the thing where we are agreeing, but it feels like arguing. No,
that's
I
fine.
think...
I like that. That's a very public radio, public broadcasting thing. Which brings me back to your question. Well
done.
Okay, so personally I think I struggled with balancing being taken seriously and just letting myself be creative. And finally, I feel like due to a lot of good work by people who have also struggled with this, it's finally starting to be okay to... I mean, it's always been okay for some people, but I think it's being more publicly accepted, widely accepted, that you can teach people through creative means. And so I'm happy that I don't have to like insist upon that. I'm just going to try and do it now, and letting go of worrying about what people think of me as a creative person, as a woman, as a blonde, all that stuff. And I think the tension, I think, so what exactly was your question? What can I speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, why that tension exists, and what are the similarities between those institutional ideas? And then I just, in the middle of that, was like, is there something about you that, because you're a creative writer, like you could just go write stories and poems.
Right.
But you find yourself, or you've made your way into spaces that are not only hard to get opportunities to make work, but is questioning how you can even exist in that space. Like that, if you're allowed to be your whole self in those spaces.
Yeah, that's like the thesis of my whole self-exploration of my entire adult life. Possibly my entire life, but I didn't really realize it until I had to find a job.
Yeah.
Like
that's when the existentialism starts.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, college existentialism is totally different. Like when it's really like, although I mean I had to pay my own rent and stuff. I mean I've been working since I was like 14, but the stakes weren't as high, you know. So I think people, you like to think, and this is the narrative, that scientists and journalists are doing like real good work for other people, like we were saying. And I think that's personally why I don't just write stories and poems. There was a time in my life when I thought that that's what I was just going to be doing, but then you come to realize that your audience is limited. Everybody should have access to fiction and poetry and art, and hopefully we'll live in a world someday where they do. But short of mass media, not a lot of people do, which is why I've actually come around to working in television again. When I graduated from college, I wanted to do comedy on television, decided that it wasn't a good place for idealists, and then I've come back around and then went through all this, like, I wanted to go back to school for neurology or neuroscience. I wanted to, like, get a PhD. I wanted to exist in that academic world. But now, again, had to get over myself, and really what I want to be doing is teaching people who don't have access to that academic world or intellectual world, including poetry reading and so forth. Want to help those people have access to that kind of stuff, and specifically science, through creativity. Because then you're engaging people who, via TV, you're able to engage a larger audience. Through creative means, I mean, what does that mean? Being interesting and artistic, basically, and using the creative experience that I have to make things more interesting for people. And so I think that the tension exists from that long narrative of journalists and scientists, in theory, want to help other people. If you say you're a scientist or a journalist, it looks to the public that you are. We know that that's not necessarily true. And yet it feels like the only people who admit that are the people who are genuinely trying to help people. And everybody else has interests that they're either hiding, financial interests probably, or haven't dealt with, like emotional interests.
So it's either a lie or a lack of awareness.
Yeah. Or both, as the case
both.
may be,
right.
Very much so.
One thing you sort of touched on is, I think, this idea that you can decide to frame scientific information or even journalistic information, which is sort of details that we need to understand the world, as a thing you need to do, like a thing you have to go do, or a thing you get to do. That seems like a thing that's missing in regular education circles. Like, okay, now we have to go to science class, and then, oh, you get to go to pottery or whatever the thing is.
Right.
And there's a little more embracing now of, it's not about tricking people into liking science. It's about kind of removing the weird baggage we've created about you have to know this stuff instead of this is really fun and exciting to get to know about this. Like there's a joyousness to it rather than just a you're going to need to know this, which is mostly what I was taught in school.
Right. I mean, and to look at it, the other way, the stuff that you get to go do, you get to, and this isn't true for everyone. Some people sign up for an art elective and it's their,
I've had those art electives too.
What were they?
I can't draw, and I find it really frustrating to try to draw.
And you were forced to draw at some point?
Yeah, still now, if you go to a conference or you go to you work in an office, they're always like, draw an interpretation of, even I'm doing social justice organizer training, and there's a lot of like, we're going to do a reading, and then everyone can explore it through. And I'm like, words is how I work. I don't. This just makes me feel dumb.
Oh, that's
so
interesting.
I can get into that feeling.
Yeah. Well, and this isn't to put this on you because I'm sure that there are plenty of things that have made you feel dumb, but that's,
Thank you for that.
I just want to acknowledge, this is a safe space for you.
Thanks.
That is how the revelation of the doodle note-taking and, ways other than words is new, and I think does engage a lot of people who, for whatever reason, found themselves, because it was just the way to do things. You take notes, everything's... And we know about learning styles, but we still don't teach to most of them.
No.
And as I
because that's too much work.
Yeah, well, yeah.
To learn new ways of teaching.
It is.
It's a lot of work.
It is. It's all dismantling all of these paradigms, which, I think all go back to money and power.
It's a pair of dimes.
Who has the power? Exactly.
Oh, you punched me in the face. Rightly so.
So getting to draw, that's just as useless. The idea that art is fun and science and math are a chore, the art being fun is just as useless as science and math being a chore.
Yeah.
There's a lot of reasons for that. It's, nerdy to be into science and math. Right. It's taught terribly.
Right. And I know plenty of people who are nerds about music. Obnoxious.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And actually, I love music, but it's not something that I've engaged with in my adult life. Like, I'm not in a band or anything.
Right.
But I used to play the violin, and I was in choir all the way through the end of high school. And my family, we sing at home together and play instruments at home together. So it's a huge part of my life. And then I, love listening to music and going to shows. And that has actually been, the music world has been really informative for me about how to deal with all that other stuff that we're talking about, the art versus science thing. Because, people are nerdy about music. You have the people who are just wealths of knowledge with just the facts of music trivia, but may not play an instrument. And then you have people who are like musical prodigies, but don't have facts or names or numbers in their heads. And all of these people are considered musicians or music people and are equally, there's the joke that everybody wants to be a musician, like comedians would like to be musicians and musicians want to be comedians, or whatever. But because it's so universal, that's helped me think about how to frame making the other two worlds meet, art and science, making art nerdier and making science cooler, because music is the coolest.
Yeah, it's embraced as cool.
Mm-hmm. Right, exactly.
You can be like a nerdy performance art band, and that becomes cool, and that's not the same thing in other spaces.
Right. Of course, and then it depends on your definition of cool again.
Oh boy.
But I think no matter if you're into that or not, musician, performance artist would be considered cooler than, a lab technician. And there's no way we're going to dismantle all of that in my lifetime, but
because look at that guy with the centrifuge.
I mean,
can really rock that thing.
Yeah, see, and so now it's become cooler to like joke about that being cool. Like nerds are cool, nerd culture is cool. But if that's not cool to you, then that's not helpful.
Yeah.
So the idea is, how do you translate? I feel like I've been a hater at times on the whole nerd culture paradigm.
Yeah.
Even talking to you, I think we've talked about I said some things that I now regret about science fiction as a genre, because I ultimately realized that I write that. I mean, speculative fiction is science fiction, fantasy. It's all useful for one thing, but I imagine a world where punk kids and hip hop kids just don't see a differentiation between what they're doing with their friends and science.
Yeah. They all like, the way they like something is the same.
Right.
Even if it's different things that they like.
Yeah, and that they could like science in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's very, so you are an idealist.
Yeah.
There's something I feel like I'm only asking you impossible questions, so I apologize, but I can't help it.
Thank you. No, I feel like I'm doing really well. You'll never hear me say that again.
No,
in my
that
life.
was amazing. I hope that's true.
I like impossible questions, I guess.
Yeah.
But if I'm talking for too long, tell me.
That's the whole point of this.
Right.
And I have no doubt you'll apologize for everything you say at some
That's what I
point.
mean. I haven't really apologized.
I'm amazed. I'm really happy about it.
Thank you.
I didn't want to congratulate you because that feels condescending.
I'll congratulate myself.
Good.
We're doing so well.
Look at
See?
this. But
us together, that feels better for me to say. We are doing well. Yes.
I feel like some of this is because I just know some of your story, but what you talked about in your journey to where you are now is in and out of a desire to find legitimacy from an external place. That idea of go to grad school. Yes, it's a pursuing of your interests, but it's also someone can ask me what I do and I can just give this really clean answer.
Yep.
I'm a good person, I am smart, I do good work. Like I can see the same part of myself that wants to be able to say that in you. And that can really be a driver, but it also can be a risk where you lose a sense of self and you lose this important creative sense of self because you can't always bring those creative tools in, especially into those academic spaces where they do a little bit of grinding it out of you. Even if you can hopefully hold on to it when you get out of the educational space and into probably more educational space.
Right.
So I'm curious where you sit now. You've said worry less about what people think of me, which I love as an idea, but it's really like daily work, I think, too. And there's parts of you and your work that continue to be public. Like a lot of what you're doing is finding ways to share things you're working on or things you're making yourself, which brings with it I'm making this and it's to reach other people, but I don't want to need their affirmation.
Right, yeah.
And where are you getting your legitimacy from if it's not someone saying you are a fancy smart person?
I mean, don't get me wrong. If someone wanted to say I was a fancy smart person, I would not be sad about it.
You are a fancy smart person.
Thank you, Levi. You are too.
Oh.
That wasn't just obligatory.
No, it was real. I know. I felt it.
There's a glow in the room now.
Those
of you can't see.
It's unsettling.
The getting over. So the first thing I'll say is there's a subtle but really important difference between making work that is working for people that you want to reach and working in the sense that they say you're a fancy smart person. And I think, but though that's a really hard line to define. I'm picturing it as like when you're like dusting off an artifact or something, like
Indiana Jones.
Yeah, pretty much. Indiana Jones, like that line is this beautiful artifact, but there's all of this dirt and grime covering it. And if you're not, I'm not going to continue with that metaphor, but I wasn't able to do that until, like you say, doing the important daily work of letting go of the what people think of me kind of thing. And that is straight up therapy. Like we talked about EMDR, that was a huge part of it.
And it's just a therapeutic technique. EMDR,
Yep.
just give people context. But.
Exactly. And I think I'm trying to think what exactly if it's worth sharing, like what the kind of moment was that helped me let go of that. But
it's worth it if you're comfortable. But if you're not comfortable, then it is not worth it.
Yeah, so true, so true. I mean, I think it was a few things. One was that I had a friend who I lost because she decided, I mean, she had a lot of pain, and I had sort of stopped trying to help her with her pain as much, and sort of had this moment where I did something for myself that didn't actually need to affect her, but it did. And she left. Like, that was the end of our friendship because of that thing. And it took me a really long time to realize that that wasn't my fault. That I could love her, and I could want to help her, and I could want to protect her. But if she was going to feel like me doing what I need to do for myself was painful to her, there's only so much you can do about that. And it's even hard for me to say that now, because I still very much want to take care of everybody around me, you know, and put them first. But if that's something that's going to happen no matter what, that's kind of the realization, is you can't control what other people think, because it's all coming from them and their shit. You can just try and be a good person about it. And that was a big part of it. There were also some, you know, mistakes that I've made that really stuck with me, that probably being a product of, you know, this generation where we're told that we're great, the idea that messing up a couple times and like really feeling like I had fucked up, honestly, it wasn't even that big of a deal, these various things, but that really chipped away at that feeling that I'm a fancy smart person, and letting other people get to me that way, you know, because of their shit. Again, because of the things that we've talked about, that I'm flaky, that I'm a woman, that I'm creative, you know, there are all these preconceptions that I couldn't control, and that doesn't actually have any effect on me. That doesn't actually, I mean, it's so corny and like self-helpy, but that wasn't stuff that I realized before.
That's a thing I find really frustrating about those cliches, is that there's a lot of good and truth in them. Right. But it gets so, I don't know, made into a commodity, or...
Yeah, well, and that's exactly the what we're talking about, is people denigrate those things because they don't get to benefit from them yet. It's like the idea that like bullies are mean because they're sad. That's true. That's never not true, I think.
But it doesn't make it okay that they're bullying.
Yeah, of course. Exactly. But you can't believe them, you know.
Right.
And it helped to get a diagnosis of ADHD. That was really huge for me, because then I finally understood what that actually meant. Like, it wasn't, I understood how it works neurologically, and obviously that's something I need when it comes to therapy. And it had been one of the many things that I suffered from without having a diagnosis, which the other three things are, well, the other one is celiac disease, which is another thing that people think is made up.
Well, it's so trendy right now.
It is, exactly. And so, you know, and
you don't actually like being on trend, so there's a tension
exactly. there. I never have since I was like a baby, basically. You know, if people were, you know, my mom would try and put me in the little frilly baby dresses, and I was like, nah, pass. Hard pass.
So did you say that when they did the testing?
Those are my first
celiac
words.
Disease, pass. Give me some bread.
I did. Gluten is my favorite thing. We've talked about this, but I really appreciate my husband for saying that to people when we're out, like, to eat with them for the first time. Is I've never met anyone who likes pasta as much as Maggie. It's like, this isn't hurting anyone as much as it's hurting me. It's very sad.
So sad that you have to say that. Look, I'm not trying to be cool.
Yeah.
I wish I could just...
It's true. And then it's like, oh, you're an activist and you're a feminist, and like, right. I don't need to. I've had very close friends in one single conversation tell me that I don't have ADHD, I don't have celiac disease, and feminism is no longer necessary.
And I told you I was sorry about that conversation.
That's why we're here today.
To work it out. I can see now you do have ADHD, celiac disease is real, and that's all I can concede to.
It's hard. It's hard to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, especially when you yeah, well so that's the thing. You're nice. You're like a nice person.
Thanks.
But that is a nightmare.
Yeah.
Yes. Because I think you want to be nice, and you want everyone to be fine. Mm-hmm. And that can make it really hard to have your own point of view.
Yeah.
Because people are happiest when you have a shared point of view with them.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So then how do you navigate your desire to let people stay in their happiness, but you get to have your own, and it can exist outside of theirs? Like, and are you finding ways to do that in your work as well as just, I'll go home for that part?
That's a good question. I think I've definitely always been okay with a little discomfort. Not always. That's not true. But I mean, like, I'm thinking of my 10-year-old self, who's this activist, you know. Like, the whole idea of being an agitator was cool.
But it's cute when you're 10, too. Even people who don't agree with you are like, "Aw, you dumb little kid."
Yeah, but I wanted
Whales
to
are
fight.
fine.
I wanted to fight with people,
Yeah.
you know. Like, I wanted, and like, again, this was the Clinton years. Like, we weren't,
right.
There wasn't a lot.
You were yelling at people who mostly agreed with you.
Yeah, and I mean, I wasn't even really yelling at anybody. Yeah, I was.
Right, you're yelling at your mom.
My peers
like,
were not
You're
into
right.
this. Right,
Yeah.
exactly. But then, yeah, like, there have been, you know, I love my parents and I get along with them really well, and I'm really lucky and probably in the minority in that sense, in a way. But yeah, then finding places where I disagree with them about life was hard, I think. So I think I've come full circle. I used to like to agitate, but then went through this period where, because of my own anxiety, it was a lot harder to do that because I didn't know if I was right, you know, and nobody's right. I mean, that's not a thing, you know, that's not possible. I mean, I like to think that I'm right most of the time, but it's also a changing thing. You know, as soon as you think you're right, you're a dangerous person. Right.
If you're not interrogating your motivations, at least.
Yeah, and I definitely believe that that philosophically, that there's no, you know, it's not the destination, it's the journey kind of thing, and there's no.
When God closes a door, he opens a window.
Stuff like that, yeah.
You don't get a second chance to make a first impression.
Yeah, see, but that one I don't like, because I must have had to change people's first impressions of me many times, I think. And it's, and this is another thing that I really like, helps me in activism, in work, in my own personal growth, is thinking about things in terms of time, you know, and it's not technically the fourth dimension, but you know what I mean.
Oh boy.
In terms of four dimensions,
there's the pot brownie kicking in.
That, you know, for instance, there's this philosophy is the wrong word, kind of therapeutic approach that I like to neuroscience, which is thinking about, for one thing, thinking about everybody being on one giant spectrum of mental health, for instance, and that whatever quote-unquote disorder you have, there is no such thing as normal, you know, neuronormativity. And that's what is great about humanity and about the world and in biology.
Normal is a social construct.
Right.